Black Rifle Coffee, baby. Breeding fuel.
Are we ready?
What are we talking about?
We're just talking, man. We haven't talked for months. I haven't done it. Like, whenever you tell me we're ready.
Dude, when's the last time you've done a podcast?
So the last time I did a podcast was June in Normandy. And one of the reasons I haven't done a podcast for this amount of time is because I was waiting for you to like clear your bullshit. Yeah. Because there's a combination of reasons, which I'll just unpack here for the audience.
Is that a legitimate reason? Or
yeah, for sure.
That's legitimate?
Yeah, like that whole thing, like you were supposed to be there in Normandy. Like this whole thing, right? And I don't feel like we need to like crawl down the rabbit hole on the negativity, but it's like how meaningful of a relationship that I have with Mike and how much it actually means to me in the sense of like, you know, his life and what he's been going through, and then like me seeing it and then being part and parcel, you know, I guess part of it, not even close, right? But I mean,
you were pretty close.
I was pretty close, but like, The Normandy trip was supposed to include you. It was supposed to be me, you, Andy, Tim. Like we were getting the band back together to go to Normandy. And not that I don't love, you know, Matt and Jared dearly because they are my business partners. It's just that you were supposed to be there. So when you weren't there, and then we did the podcast it was basically, well, it wasn't basically, it was me, Tim, and Andy. So, you weren't there, and honestly, it would have been a way better trip if you were there. I would have loved you to be there.
Was it epic?
Of course it was epic. Yeah. Like, it was epic.
I saw the footage and all the videos, and
I'm sure it just made you, like, so happy, too, because you're like, oh, man.
I was happy for you guys.
I'm so happy to be here, going through the worst fucking thing I've ever gone through in my life.
June 6th, so that would have been a month.
Yeah,
I was out of jail by then. But
cool.
Yeah,
yeah. So we've known each other for so long, and we've been friends for so long. And what people don't realize is like, yes, you hear the podcasts, and you've heard Mike and I talk on these podcasts, but Mike and I talk 10 times more. Do you think?
Yeah.
Outside of outside of these, probably at least 6x.
7x.
And you know, we get to discuss a lot of different things happening in our lives, in our entire friend group. It's not like the things we do, this life of ours from a business perspective or personal relationship perspective. It's not like this stuff is on autopilot, dude. Like this stuff is an intense amount of work, and more importantly, these are not fictionalized relationships that we create so we can.
Yeah, they're not personas.
No, this is like, you know, Mike is one of my closest friends. He lives like right down the road from me. So when he's going through something, like I'm kind of left seat, right seat with him. And man, I just wasn't in the right headspace. Like I had to kind of take some time off. The other thing was like, hey man, I knew that you're going to, based on my information, because I could see that I kind of had a front row seat, like you're going to get through it. Just like we were talking about.
Nothing was resolved then, though.
No.
Yeah, that's true. Well, let me say thank you for helping me out, man. You were like, I mean, it's not like I'm tweeting about it, but like you bailed me out of jail. You helped me financially through the situation. And dude, in my worst moments and the worst time of my life, this trauma significantly has impacted me and has been more traumatic than anything I've ever experienced in life. And you were the first dude to like, hey, are you good? You don't sound good. I'll be right there. And that was like, I appreciate that. Because, dude, I honestly don't know. I could pretend maybe and just like lie to everybody and say, hey, yeah, I was good. You know, I had the shit. No, I wasn't good.
No.
And one of the variables, the most impactful variable was you showing up. And it's probably one of the reasons why I'm still alive. I hate to say that because it sounds shitty to say out loud just to even hear myself say that, but it's true because I was so fucked up. And I still am screwed up, but I'm managing it because you don't just wake up and it's rainbows and the sunshine, it's still difficult, but every step along the way you helped me. And it wasn't about a business relationship, a position, a tactic. It was just because you're just being a good friend, and that means a lot, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, I mean, it's the least I can do, because I mean, like, I've gone through my things, obviously, too, right? It's like I've gone through my things, you know. Obviously everybody's familiar with, you know, the way the internet works, and these fictionalized, blown up stories, or people coming at you because you don't agree with, you know, whatever thing that is put out there. And like, you guys, you know, you and Andy and Tim and a few of these other guys, like, we got a fucking fire base, man. We got 360-degree security.
Yeah.
And you and I go back so far. Like, you know, you're a friend, and you're a friend first. We just so happen to do business because we're entrepreneurs, and we do business and we do content. But at the end of the day, like, I care about you. I care about your family. I care about your success. More importantly, I care about you being around so you can provide value, like, selfishly, so you can plug in on my own life, my life of the community from a veteran's perspective. But like, I just legitimately care about you. And like, I knew, you know, like this thing blowing up your life. And I'm like, holy fuck, you know, this could happen to me. Like this kind of thing, the way that it escalated and the way it rolled out, it was careening out of control. It was not correct, meaning it wasn't unethical, or it was unethical. It was immoral. Like, I would stretch to say it seemed very illegal and unconstitutional to me. Like, knowing you for as long as I have, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I've known this dude, I mean, since when? Like,
Before the Black Rapper
yeah,
coffees,
like way before. This is
anything.
like, I've known this dude forever. And I'm like, this is not the guy I've known for this length of time. More importantly, I know you to the point of which, and I've spent so much time with you and your kids and your family, this is just not accurate. And so seeing what you were going through, and then hearing what you were going through, you know, obviously we spent hours on the phone, and really just empathizing with you in this scenario. Like, fuck, man, like I got to make sure I'm there. And I just had to make sure I was there, and it wasn't for anything other than like I got to be a friend here. I got to be a friend for you. And thank God you were like a couple blocks away from the house. like that was just by happenstance. Yeah.
Like 2 minutes from your house.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I also think, you know, just people listening to this, it's important kind of to highlight your own friend groups. I know a lot of veterans and just people. I don't think it's a veteran issue, but it's a people issue. More people have reported they're lonely, single, depressed, anxious, and that's because of a lack of family, friends, connections. Mm-hmm. That's sad, man, because a lot of people are hurting. And Kyle Thompson on the Undaunted podcast, which is a great podcast, talks about this with me on my podcast later, speaking about how if you have a friend that's like a 3 a.m. friend,
yeah,
you know, it's been put out there in the internet, like, what kind of friends you got? Like, that's a 3 a.m. friend. It's kind of crazy, but is it? It's like, you want a guy who's going to show up, or a friend who's going to show up no matter what. And the reality is, only few, if any, people in your life are going to actually show up.
Yeah.
A lot of people are going to text, and I appreciate that, because a lot of people did. A lot of people didn't. I mean, even people I expected to didn't. And I say that out loud only to give perspective, because I'm not judging those people, because given the right circumstances, I might even stay away from me, depending on how things are put out. But it's really important to not only have people in your life that are going to be available and kind of create and curate that tribe, but also be that guy to be available, because it takes a lot of effort. I mean, for you to actually, while you're managing everything in your life, the kids, the family, the business, the trips, the marketing, all the things, and then be available, nearly impossible unless you're just willing to do it, which you were. And so for people who are listening to this, like, even in my own ways, I've been like, oh, I need to be available. I need to actually be available. Because I'm the guy who's like, whenever there's a burden, especially that's created around my circumstances, I don't like to be that tax and burden on people. And so I will immediately recluse and I'll isolate. And people are like, are you good? Yep. Everything okay? Yep. And then I think for the first time in my life, I think you might have asked me that, are you okay? And I was like, nope. And I knew I wasn't. But it's the first time that I actually wasn't. And it didn't stem from this situation with my spouse and all this criminal BS that was fake and false and a lie. It had everything to do with my kids. Because getting your child taken away from you, not understanding that, one, how can this happen to me? And it's happening right now, and you have no say-so, no control in it, especially for a person who is typically in control. And I like being in control of my own destiny because I trust myself. And now it's like, oh, nobody trusts me. And then the state of Utah in this case, which it happens all over the country, is saying, we don't trust you with your own child. And so they take my child. That, with the prospect of them taking my twins, my other 2 children, was so daunting and such a horrible feeling. That's why I didn't think I could survive it. Because I'm like, how do you recover from this? And you just put it in my head like, hey, man, there's going to be a day. It might not be right now. It might be a year from now where everything's going to kind of hash out and the truth is going to come to light. But when you're in it, in the moment, it didn't feel that way. It didn't feel that way. I mean, I didn't get the notice that it was dismissed from the 4th District Court, which, I mean, for all the bad that happened, there were men and women doing their job. And that's why the case was dismissed 55 days in, because a judge and a state attorney actually did their job. But that was 55 days of hell. Yeah. And we talked about it before the podcast, I'm still dealing with parental things that the state of Utah has invoked on me, where even the people around who work for this system that's known as DCFS, Department of Child and Family Services, which is like Department of Child and Family Services, like you're providing a service. Are you providing a service? Or are you actually destroying families? And sure, there's cases where they're doing something, but there's also cases like in my situation where they wanted to save face. They didn't want to lose. And so they did everything they could, including lying, to make sure that they created a process and a plan that did everything to destroy me as a father. Not my reputation, not a persona, not a tax on my title, but me as a person.
Yeah.
Me as a dad. And that continues to suck every single day.
Well, and one of the things that was like, I mean, out of a number of injustices that we could actually discuss, but like one of the things that hit you really hard was this accusation that you cared more about your public image than you cared about your kids, which is like just fundamentally
bananas.
It's not only bananas, it's one of quite possibly one of the most horrific things that you can level at somebody, because you're essentially saying what they care about more is their public persona on social media more than they actually care about their kids, which is directly not only 180 degrees misaligned from who you are, because you do social media to build your business, to build a better life for your kids. Like it's all kind of like the hierarchy of needs specifically related to what you're trying to accomplish. And then knowing you, and for as many years as I have, I'm like, for people that don't know you, and for people within the court system, people within the community, to basically accuse you of things like like that. They like out of a lot of different accusations, like that one was like really fucking painful for you because you kept bringing it up and bringing it up.
It was
and I'm like,
wild,
bro. It's like it's beyond insulting. It's like it's almost like assault.
Yeah.
And in the sense of like, and I'm not trying to over dramatize it. I'm just like,
It was dramatic.
yeah, dude. Yeah, because like you're like, hey man, I will set my like everything on fire tomorrow. I will take everything I own. Don't mess with my kids. Like everything, I will like forfeit everything. I'll give it all back. I don't care. It doesn't matter. You want to take any and all things? You want me to fucking throw it all in the trash? But like, don't limit my access to my children. And I'm like, yeah. And I feel the same way. And I was like, I'm right there kind of with you. I'm like, I'm feeling this. I'm like, bro, if I'm in your situation, like out of all the accusations and falsehoods that were like put out, like if you're facing this life without your kids, like, whoa. So now like I knew like that's the switch in my head too, where I'm like, hey dude, if I'm looking into a future without my children, that's not a hopeful and incentivized, bright and beautiful future. I can deal with a lot in the sense of take it all away, don't really care, but my kids, no, like my family, like all those things, like the most meaningful things that we have in our life. Like you and I've also talked about it. It's like, man, I have stopped posting just period around like my kids or doing anything like, and that doesn't mean that I'm not doing them. It just means like what I'm talking to, like, you know, talking to people on social media about has nothing typically to do with my kids. And more importantly, like that's something I'm going to keep like completely separate because there are a bunch of dingbats out there, man. Like there are a bunch of fucking Looney Tune weirdos out there. And I'm like, you know what? I thought about it. I was like, I'm just going to keep this completely separate. My family life, my business life, my business life. And just, you know, me, I'm out there. Like I can't like unring that bell. Like I'm out there, you know, the good, the bad, the ugly. I'm out there, but my kids don't have to. If they don't want to participate in social, they don't ever have to. They never even have to have an account, but their faces won't be on there. You know what I mean?
Want your coffee?
Oh yeah. Let's get some coffee.
Here, one of the things, I mean, I think people, a lot of people.
Thank you, sir. That's Heston.
Thanks, brother.
Here, you take that one. I gotta take this one.
A lot of people, I did a whole bunch of public statements, and I appreciate all the people who support both Black Rifle and FieldCraft and me and you. And so I feel an obligation. We talked about this. Like, part of it is, you know, we grew up in an era post-military where we didn't take advantage of an opportunity. The opportunity took advantage of us because we came out and we had a story.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing operations in the military. I wasn't doing the military for the gram. Like, it didn't even exist.
Yeah, exactly. It didn't exist, or it wasn't even in our orbit.
It wasn't
even in our universe of possibilities to even utilize.
I didn't have social media until 2015. Yeah. That was the first social media kind of set up, and I probably was deployed with the agency when I started it because I knew I was going to transition to business, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and so I'm like, what am I doing? So when we went on to social media, it was like the first time military guys from our background was doing anything on social media. So it became very popular. And this is all to say that I'm appreciative of all the support that we got and gained via the opportunities that we were given at the time. Now, and we've talked about this before, if you talk about your veteran status or the things that you did militarily, it's not a really good position because of the volatile nature of the political landscape that is war. And I get it. I understand it. But I did feel an obligation, which is why I went out and said, look, here's what happened to the people who supported me. Post that now, and me and you have talked about this in recent days and weeks. I just don't have the stomach to share a lot of my life that I shared overtly with the world. And for the first time, I'm just enjoying being present with my family, with my children.
Well, I think it's like, I took a couple months off, and obviously we didn't do the podcast, and there's a combination of reasons why we didn't do the podcast.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, that's good. It's like, one, I felt it was really important for us only to put out shows that I felt created value in the community. Like, I continue to talk about this, and I will continue to talk about this until the day I die, which is like no toxic fuel, which is the veteran community and what we have right now, and the data that Tim and I were talking about specifically in Normandy when we were there is that veteran suicide rate is like accelerating at a rapid point.
Bad.
And so now more than ever, the community needs people that aren't contributing to any toxic fuel within the environment. And I've been talking about this for the last couple of years, but now I'm even more committed to it in the sense of, you know, people talk about it. And I've heard it from a lot of guys. They're like, what, you know, why aren't you like going on your Evan rants about, you know, fucking generals being pieces of shit or whatever? I'm like, because, man, I'm exhausted with the level of toxic fuel that is on social media, and it's not necessarily directed towards me. It's just in general, in the sense of, I actually don't really get a lot. I don't even see it. It's the community as a whole is experiencing what I would say is it has a sickness, as a mental illness, and we have an acute level of depression. We have an extreme amount of anxiety, and we have, like, you know, physical issues, right? Physical injuries that we're dealing with. And then when you spill on what I would say is that toxic psychological fuel from negative interactions in social media, where they're getting their information specifically from different platforms, and they're just thinking the world is just full of fucking hate and discontent. And I'm telling you right now, man, it is fucking not. Like, when you get off your phone, and I was telling you this the other day, in 2 months, I've spent literally less than 2 hours on social media combined since June 8th.
And been camping, fly fishing with the family.
Yeah, I put my phone down. Like, I mean, I use my phone for work. Like, I use it for emails and, you know, video conferences and things like that. But I've literally not tuned in. I haven't missed one fucking second of it, man. Like, not 1 second. And I've been in some of the most remote wilderness areas out in the lower 48, fly fishing and disconnecting. And I've been thinking about this because what I'm trying to provide, and by no stretch of the imagination is my fucking ego big enough for me to believe that I'm some type of inspirational and or a leader in the community. Like, I'm going to take that position. That's not my perspective. When you identify a problem, you have to work on the problem and do your best. I'm not trying to take a leadership position, and I'm not trying to write a book on fucking command or accountability. Like, that's not me. I don't really give a shit. But what I do care about is this is a team, and it's a culture, and it's a community. And when you see there's an issue, if you don't take action, you're culpable. So my actions are directly reflective to, like, everything that I've done in my adult life is like me taking action to solve a problem. And if I think social media directly contributes to a negative psychology within the veteran community that could directly accelerate our suicide rate. So what I did from June until today was I just didn't get on. I just fucking stayed off. And guess what, guys? It's fine. More importantly, I would highly recommend it. You don't have to be on this hamster wheel of digital media all the time, and there's no reason to interact in, like, you know, the negative, toxic fuel that people are spewing. Half the time they're fucking bots, or they're like mouth breathers from some other fucking country. Why? Like, why accelerate your negative interaction, which ultimately leads to a more negative psychological effect. And then now you can't directly contribute and create positivity in your family. Well, it's self-aid, buddy aid. You can't fix yourself. Like, good. Instead of fucking scrolling on Instagram, why don't you do, like, knock out some fucking pull-ups, knock out some fucking sit-ups, knock out some, push-ups. I don't know, but we were talking about this earlier, which is one of the most powerful words in the English language right now that I'm, like, really focused on is no. Just say no. And it sounds really trite and a little bit stupid, like we're doing, like, an 80s anti-drug campaign, but being disciplined and saying no and tuning the fuck out of and engaging in like what I would say is toxic psychological behavior that will accelerate the negative impacts of our community's like psychology, that's something that we owe the entire community. We can't fucking do it. And the reason I say that is because, I mean, bro, in the last 3 years, close and personal friends of ours, not only Neil, but other people that we've known in our universe, to include a guy just like a couple months ago, like they're taking their own lives, and to me that's just not acceptable. And by the way, guys, sorry if it just doesn't like, put us in the mood to throw out a bunch of fucking jokes. Like, yeah, it's heavy. It's heavy shit, and I don't know how we got on this, but I mean, it's heavy shit. I've got to take some type of responsibility. And the reason I did that was like, hey man, I don't have to be on there. I'm just going to take a couple months off.
I listened to Rogan's, one of my favorite guests that Rogan has is Sebastian Younger.
He's awesome.
Because he always has
really
wise perspectives based on his life. And, he's got a new book and he's talking about his near-death experience. And one of the interesting things from that conversation is where he talks about how he's an atheist and he doesn't believe, but he found it very unique in his near-death experience, despite all the scientists who say, it's like the optic nerve and a neurological decay or falling out where you get the light and the tunnel and all the illustrations. Yeah. But he said, what was crazy is my dad was there. His father was there. And his father was in the room as clear as the doctor was in the room. Mm. And he was present and he was trying to welcome him and basically comfort him into the afterlife. Mm. And he knew, I think he said, and I'm listening to the podcast yourself, but there's an abyss behind him. And he knew if he went to that abyss, he would follow his dad, but he felt offended. He was like, Dad, why are you here? But he didn't have a preconceived notion or thought that his dad was supposed to be there. He just showed up. And so it kind of gave him kind of an understanding of like, there's something different about this. And the commonality was that in most near-death experiences, there is your loved ones who have passed there to welcome you into the afterlife. And that's a digression just to bring it back to one of Sebastian Younger's principles is being very minimalist and simplistic about experiences. And he used an analogy, which you'll get because you've likely experienced this. And for dads or moms out there who don't spend a lot of time on their phones on playgrounds would have experienced this. But he said, typically when he goes to the playground, because every parent, which is every single playground I've been to with my kids, is on their cell phone. It's almost like the place where you drop your kids and then you can get on your cell phone. Yeah. And he's there rescuing all the kids because there's like a kid stuck on the monkey bars, a kid who falls and he's crying. Yeah. He's policing up kids and he's like, you're crying, where's your father? And it's like, oh, his father's on the bench. And he's not saying this, but this is my experience. And it's like, we're so detached because we're so immersed in our cell phones. I've talked about this forever. One of the best ways to prepare yourself is through mental resilience, and being detached from your phone is going to make you situationally aware and more mentally resilient because you're not sucked into a portal that you think is a reality that's better than your actual reality. Mm. And that's the disappointing thing about a lot of people. We might have discipline, perspective. I don't know. I don't think I have an addictive personality. I'm not addicted really to anything besides work. But when I when I see people around me at restaurants, at airports, everywhere you go, sucked into this artificial world and detached from their kid. Like, dude, when I was in an Airbnb, and you know me, like you've been around me and my kids. When my kids are with me, I'm present. Even when I'm working, I'm like, something happens, I don't just like push them out. I'm like involved. I was at a park and this dude who looked like like he was into himself, into his world, into his fitness. Hot dude. Just hot dude. Good legs on him. Good ham hocks.
Yeah.
He was out there and his little boy was probably seven years old, was fishing in this little pond. And I was out there with my twins. We were running around. And I was overly enjoying and taking in every single moment, every single second, because I knew there's a possibility I might lose custody of my kids to the state of Utah. And because, you know, the state of Utah is obviously more capable of raising my children than I am.
Yeah, obviously.
And I saw his interactions for an hour. And for an hour, he was on his cell phone and not paying attention to his little boy, even when he caught a fish. And it broke my heart, man. I wanted to go over there when that kid pulled the fish out and his dad was so disinterested in him catching likely a fish, maybe for the first time, and was just like, yeah, whatever. And then helped him and just chucked it back in the water. And his son was kind of like, what? And I was just like, dude, what is going on in our world? Most of the problems that we are experiencing in this world have to do with that damn cell phone.
100%.
Most of
them.
Like,
this is like probably one of the single best and the single worst things that's ever happened to humanity, period.
Yes.
Like, period.
Period.
Like, my kids, and I mean, I have to say no, right? I have to say no to the cell phone a lot. And there are times when you have it on, there are times when you obviously you don't, but I see the same thing. Like, I walk through airports, everybody's got their head down, and then I'm just like looking around. I've spent a ton of time traveling this summer, a lot for work, some for, you know, pleasure, but I spent a lot of time in airports just looking around. And everybody, when I say everybody, I would honestly estimate
it's everybody,
like 90%.
Yeah.
If they weren't
sure.
eating, they were doing the thumb scroll. So they were either sitting down in their chairs. Like, you know, I don't count the people moving from gate to gate, but if you're like sitting down, they're either eating or doing the thumb scroll. Like, and I would kind of like see what they're scrolling at, and it's fucking Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, but it's one social platform of choice. Thumb scroll, and then a lot of times it's like cell phone right hand, you know, bag of chips in left hand. And I'm sitting here thinking like, wow, this country has such a sickness where they have to disconnect from reality at any point in time and then fill the reality that they do have, this vessel for interacting with the world in a healthy and productive way. They're going to scroll with one hand, like looking at other people's fictional reality through their fucking social media feeds. And then they're going to kill the vessel that they have to interact in a positive way with a real environment. They're going to go home, put a fucking VR headset on. And I'm like, we're on one of those bullet fucking trains to idiocracy, if I've ever seen one, where they're like, I'm going to fix this, you know, plants aren't growing. I mean, if you guys haven't seen this, right? It's like the presidential address where he's talking about, we're going to fix the plants aren't growing because they're trying to water their plants with fucking energy drink fucking fuel. I forget what it was called, but I'm like, bro, I'm sitting here thinking about all of the different things that we're doing, and this, I would say it's a very minority portion of our society that is trying to pull people out of this hole. And when they have this excuse as to, I think a lot of this is driven on like just corporate capitalist greed. And so I don't want to sound like a commie. I'm saying when you're so fixated on growth and profitability, when you know what you're selling to the American public is essentially poison, but you continue to do it, and it's like you not only continue to do it, but then you morph the information around health and fitness to where you you truly believe, and or you're putting out propaganda around, no, it's okay. I don't think it is okay. Living a sedentary, unhealthy life plugged into social media and caloric extremes where it's okay. I got a great story. So we went out to the Tillamook cheese factory. Like I took the kids because I thought this was going to be awesome, right? I'm like
the restaurant?
Tillamook is the cheese, and it's a dairy in Oregon.
Oh, yeah.
So I take the kids to Tillamook, and we're out on the Oregon coast, and we're cruising around, and like we want to go to the dairy to check things out. And I was like, this is going to be epic, man. We're going to see like, how is
dairy
cheese
cows
made? I just thought like, this is going to be
Churning
some of the,
cheese.
this is going to be like the nerdiest, like dad taking the kids to the dairy, to see the cheese factory and how it's made. This is the shit that my kids will like really be mad at me when they're like 20. Like, oh, you remember when you took us to the cheese factory? How lame. Well, I never really, it didn't dawn on me that Tillamook was also an ice cream company because it's a dairy, right?
Yeah.
And primarily, I guess they serve ice cream. I just thought of them as from my perspective, a cheese. So we get there and we go on the VIP tour is what it's called or something, right? It's like behind the scenes VIP tour, which is not really, you're not a very important person. You're just like going, you get a unique look at how the cheese is made. What I'm thinking. We go back and it's basically a pitch for their ice cream. And so they have all these chairs and tables set up.
You
and
ice cream taste?
And you're tasting ice cream, which by the way is totally cool for kids because they'll be like way into it. However, my kids were so bored because it was just like a half hour long ice cream commercial. And I am bored to death. Like I am like, oh my God, this sucks so bad. This sucks so bad.
And you paid for that.
And I paid for it. It was like, dude, it was like $40 a person. So we're $160 into this for, 4-person endeavor on this, like behind the scenes VIP. And I turn over to my kids and I'm like, are you guys into this? And they're like, no, we want to leave so bad. I'm like, let's get up. I just like get up in the middle of this thing with all 4 of us. And there are people sitting at different desks. Like, dude, there's 30 people in this room.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I look over at one of the dudes and they're talking about this new ice cream flavor. And I made the joke to my wife because he's obviously he's an extreme caloric athlete, we'll call it, right? He eats to a great amount of excess regularly.
Cachet.
And I mean, he's wearing like a tarp. Like that's the only thing, like they just rolls up in a tarp and goes out because that's
poncho.
basically, And they're talking about this new flavor and he's like, does it come in 5-gallon containers?
That's what he asked.
That's what he wants. He wants a 5-gallon.
Ooh, yeah.
He wants a single serve 5-gallon container.
A truck.
I'm like, Jesus, dude. How many calories is a 5-gallon? Like, dude, that's got to be like 50,000
calories.
And I'm like, holy shit. So we get up, we leave, and I'm like, okay, I'm pretty open to whatever people want to, whatever they want to do with their time. That's freedom first. Or hey, man, I'm pretty libertarian, but when you're adapting your physical form. And you need you actually are going to need a wheelchair because you've eaten so much you just can't even move your body around. I'm just telling everybody, like, I think that's a point where you might want to go like, dude, I gotta like pump the brakes on my 5-gallon ice cream containers.
Yeah.
Maybe this is the time.
How many times has he been to that VIP?
Bro. And we go to the Tillamook thing and we go and we get ice cream, but it's so funny afterwards because we're like eating ice cream. I'm looking around. I'm like, holy shit, dude. You go to the difference between Normandy and some of the other communities that I was cruising around in this summer was like people were riding their bikes and walking everywhere. Things were normal sized. You come up and you're like, you can get things like not only super sized, you can get things like the bucket, like you can get half the bucket is full of ice cream and half the bucket is full of like fried cheese, fried cheese ice cream bucket, 5-gallon bucket. Jesus. Go for it. But I couldn't help but notice as I'm like cruising around. Of course, you're not going to have the same type of interaction with the world if you're physically limited. You're like causing a physical limitation. Like you're not gonna be able to hike up a hill. You're not gonna be able to see a sunset because you're not gonna be able to get to that point. You know, you're gonna be tired all the fucking time because you can't sleep very well. Like, so it just seems to me like saying no, meaning like stopping the scroll, cutting that back, and like maybe like cutting back on excess caloric intake. I listen, I'm not a rocket surgeon. I just think, man, that could improve a lot of people's quality of life. Really could.
We're living in an excess of everything right now.
Yeah.
We have it so good. Even the poorest of Americans are doing really well. I mean, we're in the top 1%, obviously, of the entire world's GDP, and we're not suffering.
No.
And so we're picking and choosing what suffering is, right? And I think that's always been an issue, but never seen before on this scale. And that's my fear of like where this country is headed. I mean, me and Andy did the Tim Waltz conversation on the Ironclad.
What was that about?
It's a show called Focal Point. We focus on like current events.
Yeah.
And Tim Waltz, who's going to be, he's
the VP, right?
candidate
Yeah.
for the Democrats.
For your candidate, because you're really into it, right? You're pro.
Well, this dude lied. This dude lied about everything in his positioning for becoming the VP candidate. I mean, he was caught in conversations talking about how he went to war. He went to combat.
Oh, seriously?
Oh, yeah. Like
so he's straight up stolen valor.
Straight up stolen valor. Straight up stolen valor. Where he talks about, you know, carrying the weapons to war, the same weapons I carried, and you could hear the conversation on that episode. But it's like,
what's the podcast? Focal Point?
it's called Focal Point. It's on Ironclad's
Okay.
YouTube channel. Yeah. And we talk about Tim Walz, but the point is, he was a National Guardsman for 24 years. He was like in field artillery. He was in a combat organization. You know, This is a combat arms organization. Never deployed. Right before his deployment, he turned his paperwork in. He said he was a command sergeant major. Never was a sergeant major. He didn't qualify because he never went to Sergeant Major's Academy.
Yeah.
And then he said, I mean, he was handing out command sergeant major coins to people, like which is bananas.
Solid.
But you can get away with just being a complete and utter liar to everyone, and just manufacture a term or whatever, and be running the country the following cycle.
Yeah.
You could be a sitting senator or sitting congressman running the entire country's policies based on a lie. Like he even said, this was just put it out by Morning Wire this week, which is a great show, that he did IVF, and it came out, and it was reported by like the Associated Press, by very liberal corporate media organizations, that's not what he did. He didn't even do IVF. So he says it as a platform in the DNC while he's speaking, trying to get people on his side of all the issues that he ran into and all the reasons why IVF is so important. By the way, it's not even on the policy agenda to take away IVF. Like that's not even controversial.
Right.
Trump's come out and said, like, we're not going after people who are doing IVF. Like, what are you talking about? And the IVF, he didn't even do IVF, but he did something that's in the body that doesn't involve an embryo, but he used it as like a talking point. It's like you're making things up. And it's not just one side. It's the entire system, the entire institution. And I think it's like the problem in my particular case, it has to do with all these institutions that are being ran by broken people, just making shit up because they can get away with it. So if you can get away with it, why would you not exacerbate and potentially run on a campaign of lies? Because when you're confronted with that lie, you just go, no, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant.
That's not what I meant.
Yeah, it's taken out of context. We'll explain. I'll explain later, or I won't explain at all.
Yeah.
And then you're good to go. So it's like, there's a lot of distrust and mistrust, more so than ever before. But again, it speaks to a larger issue. I deleted all. I need to drink another one of these new tonics. Oh my God, these are already. I'm sweating excessively already. So I deleted all the social media apps off my phone. It just felt really good. And the only one I have is Facebook because I have Marketplace, and I'm purging, trying to minimize. That's not.
I never have
minimize a lot of the stuff that I have in my life. And so even when I do an Instagram post, and I do it for the company, I'll log in, do the post, and delete it. And I do that because my behavior and attention has been driven into a pattern of life to go straight to the app. And I'm like, why am I on this app?
Yeah.
Well, because you're being manipulated and controlled. I've gotten rid of all of that except Facebook because I do the Marketplace thing, but it's a fake account. It's an account that I can just look at Marketplace. The amount of news articles that are literal lies on
It's
Facebook,
amazing.
that I'm like, it had to do with that controversy between the person who is, and I don't even want to get into it because I know we'll get suppressed across the board for it, but it's like the boxer who wasn't male, female.
Yep.
There are literal articles that were saying something that was completely not true, that they were banned and that they were pulled and their medal was pulled. And I was like, that's a fake article. And then you read the comments and everybody's agreeing with thousands of comments. Yeah. I'm like, so who's the perpetrator? It's not the person who's trying to tell the truth on the app. It is the app itself. It is Meta itself who's the perpetrator, who's propagating lies that it chooses to allow people to consume to basically control a narrative and control the population. That's the scariest thing in the world to me, because 90% of our country is in a position where they hate their life in their 9 to 5. They love getting home to their families, and to fill the gap until they can get home, they go on the phone, and whatever they see is driving their emotions. And that's scary, man. That's so scary.
What's also scary that, and we deal with this all the time, right? And we've dealt with this for years, is that the constitutional right to bear arms is continuing to be restricted in social media and multiple different platforms. Like, there's nothing illegal about owning a firearm, but yet there's these accusations and these general restrictions based on, you know, the so-called aggrandizing or whatever, where you can have any and all things related to what I would say is more woke agenda type bullshit on, you know, TikTok or Instagram or whatever you want. But the second you, like, you know, pull out a 365 review or, you know, screw a suppressor on a rifle, now all of a sudden, you know, the morality police show up and they tamp down your narrative. Well, okay, but how is that directly impacting society and the way that people interact and communicate around a constitutional right? Because if we can't communicate specifically around these things and then educate a different section of our population that might not understand, and more importantly is being fed misinformation and or like misleading facts and lies, well, they're directly putting the finger on the scale. It's unconstitutional, which to me, I'm like, dude, this is illegal.
How are they getting away with it?
Well, I think the way they're getting away with it is because most of, I think, our political representatives they don't really give a shit. Like, they don't really care.
They're bought.
They don't really care, like, left or right. Like, if the money's better on the one side, or if the power's more on, like, they'll switch jerseys. They don't really give a shit. Like, and so I'm not trying to be like, is like, you know, cynical. I think there's a part of this is just like, okay, well, we have to accept some of these realities as fact. You know, it's like accepting the fact that gravity exists, and then you move on. Meaning, like, okay, well, what can I do about it? And, you know, I mean, one of the things that we've obviously directly contributed to is normalizing the term black rifle. We've done that exceedingly well over 10 years. Actually, nobody's done more for normalizing that term. Weird. Nobody gives us credit for that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, boy, it's so interesting how there's a definitive portion of a population that is so apt to say, you know, negative things, and or we don't do enough, where I'm like, bro, I don't know another company that's done more. In some circumstances, I'll tell you right now, there's not a manufacturer in the fucking United States that has done more as far as overall marketing impressions, putting things on shelf, putting things specifically on shelves across the United States than this company.
Yeah.
And it's
Fighting
like
companies
good,
that didn't
and,
want it to have.
Yeah. And by the way,
Black Rifle.
while they were shoveling their profits into the coffers of foreign investment firms for 10 years, and definitively during the Obama administration, like just like taking the money buckets and throwing them back into all the other foreign companies that own these firearms manufacturers, supposedly American firearms manufacturers. Like, there's been no issue or complaint coming from them.
Yeah.
But somehow a coffee company
Yeah.
is like lumped into this. I'm like, guys, like, don't fall into this narrative of false information in the context of, like, if we're not fact checking very specific things directly related to social media, we're not doing ourselves any justice. And more importantly, like, every time you tune into it, you have to understand that people are trying to manipulate you, which is a whole other reason where I think people are finding this like level of dissatisfaction and negative psychology, because they're like, I don't know what the fuck is real.
Yeah.
What's real? I mean, Joe pulled it up on a show the other day, and God, I think he was with Michael Malice. He was talking to Michael, and they were having the conversation, and Joe was like, yeah, the State of the Union wasn't live. Did you see that clip? Where the State of the Union wasn't live. They proved it because Biden's watch was on a different time or something like that, and then Joe ended up pulling up the article, and and Joe was like, "Fuck, they got me." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, even like a dude that is like highly skilled in social media, that spends a significant amount of time like interfacing with a lot of different people in the community, he can still be duped.
Yeah.
And now when you think about that from a general consumer's perspective, holy
Everybody's
shit,
duped.
bro.
Yeah.
Like, that was part of my whole thing in the last couple of months, because I knew what you were going to go through. I'm like, I can't even be near it, because it's going to make me so angry. And more importantly, there's going to be a bunch of people that are going to be spreading direct misinformation and or lies because of 3 qualifying things: jealousy, envy, greed, a lot of it, right? And I know I was going to be like, I'm going to fucking tune in and want to like, but I'm going to be angry all day long. I'm like, I'm going to take a break.
Yeah, I can't do. I mean, my whole thing is I've just given up on any justification for myself. Like, I mean, everything from, I lied about my career. It's like every single aspect of everything that I've tried to do well at has been criticized. And so I'm just done campaigning for myself, because I know myself, and my family and friends who know me, that's important. And any energy wasted in any direction that's negative or toxic has not benefited me at all. And so I don't, like, a lot of people are like, hey man, I'm sorry to see all the hate. And I'm like, I don't see it because I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, people who talk in echo chambers on their own social media account, feeding themselves all of this virtue signaling, talking about me, I don't get that. I've just never understood that. It seems very desperate and very manipulative and very like sad. And so I've even seen people who used to be in my camp and friends of mine who have, well, I heard, it's like, did you ever think just to contact me and just ask me the question?
Yeah.
So the only thing I could do is just like be true to myself. And this whole thing, when it went down, what's sad about it, but what I'm very satisfied with, and we've had this conversation, is it's filtered down and distilled the bourbon, the really good bourbon in my life that used to be corn whiskey. And all of that, I got a false sense of security. And then a situation like this just distilled my circle, and it's a lot smaller than I thought it was. And I'm thankful for that because I only have a certain amount of energy to allocate to friends and people that are very important to me. And that has now shrunk drastically. And I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with that. Like people who are like, well, doesn't it suck? No, it doesn't. It sucks, but it's like, it's also like a blessing in disguise, man. Like a lot of the things that I thought, even for my own false sense of security, that I'm like, this will never happen to me. It's like, it could happen to anybody. And I thought that over the domestic terrorist thing.
Yeah.
And, being classified even on a domestic terrorist watch list because I was worked for the CIA, and the military and the CIA and the TSA never talked to each other. I was like, oh, so this system is dumb. Like they actually don't talk to each other. And I knew that being in the military because I saw it with interagency and organizations. You've seen it. I mean, getting the phone call on the fire base at midnight, hey, you're going to be attacked tomorrow, and they're hanging up on you. I'm like, what? It's like, that's how this all works. So don't have an expectation that it's going to work any different. My fear moving forward with the country, especially with all the things that are going on, we saw it during the Antifa BLM protest, and that's why I started American Contingency because of it, was all of the Sean Kings of the world antagonizing people with the bots to get out, hit the streets, and burn down even black businesses.
Yeah.
And I was shouting, going, what are you guys doing? You're going out and hitting the streets because some white dude who's pretending to be black, which I'll stand by that, some white dude pretending to be black is telling you to hit streets and burn it down. He's not being suppressed. He's being propagated. And then the bots are propagating you to go into Atlanta and burn down black businesses. There is something here that's not making sense, and it's the technology. What's going to happen when potentially, and I'll just say this out loud, Trump loses? Because right now, the statistic, 80+%, high 80s, in the corporate media is favoring articles and
100%.
news coverage that's positive. Mm-hmm. And you flip that coin on the other side, high 80s, even 90s, it's negative for the other candidate, which is Trump. What is that going to mean in a general election where all of a sudden we have a candidate who is completely worthless, not even as a candidate, but as a human being, and all of a sudden they're the miracle child? It's like the person who is propagating themselves as being Asian because she's half Indian, and all of a sudden she's African American. Like she's picking and choosing and down selecting and playing the field very well. She's in the DNC talking about how she's going to change the world, and she's a VP. She's the VP now, and she hasn't changed anything. Or she's criticizing Trump for his lack of integrity on the border when she's the border czar. And how is that going to turn out when she wins? And then Trump loses, and 60, 70% of the country, depending on if RFK is on board, 60 to 70% of the country is like, they don't trust that. And what does that mean? Dude, I don't know what it means, but it likely means, especially in my own situation, that I'm going to be buckling down and making phone calls if that's available, and just hunkering down with my family in rural, name the piece of land and state that we're in, because every major metropolitan city is on fire in America. And that's a scary prospect, but it's more tethered to reality and a realistic kind of approach to what's going to potentially happen than I've ever predicted in my life. I mean, I don't know how it's going to work out, but it's not going to work out well. Either way, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I've like, because you look at the polling, and we obviously we've seen this movie before multiple times, right? And you've seen it play out multiple times. And when the entire apparatus is favoring, which it seems really insane to me as far as like their ability to manipulate a vote, because there should be at least like 50-50. Like, hey man, I'm okay with even just like, hey, just having like equality of like parity, just parity, 50-50. Sure, man. Like if we're going to do one positive, one puff, like, okay, we got to kind of hold them task on this other thing. Like, puff, there you go. There's like, have some, I guess, parity across the board, but it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, it seems interesting in the way that it was orchestrated. It almost seems like now, and maybe I'm just misinterpreting it, but it almost seems like now, like the whole rotation out was kind of planned.
Yeah, it
kind of seems like it's planned.
Yeah,
the big machine is like spun up real fast, pretty well prepared to.
Yeah, she hit it the next day.
Yeah, it was like fairly good. Like,
well, I made the prediction on social media, like at least talking about it a year prior, saying Biden would never be the candidate. And it's like, why? Because he has the least chance in the Democratic Party of winning. Mm-hmm. So if he's not, and then there was a lead up and there was all this drama. And then you look at, like, for example, Trump nearly being canoed on stage in a world televised rally, how quickly that came and went. And it's like, oh, yeah, he was, well, whatever. And you know why that is, and why
3 days in the news cycle.
Yeah, why the perspective is that way is because the corporate media has completely, where we have this like this model of being fair and unbiased. Like you said, 50-50 would be fair. There's going to be biased. It's unfair and biased, and that's the corporate media position. So what does that mean? Well, every article, like my favorite is when I go to Apple News because they're the most most biased. Yeah. If I swipe it to the right, the first story is 5 takeaways from Kamala Harris's acceptance speech. And then going down, it's like all what Harris did and didn't say in her big speech. It's all positive stories about Kamala Harris. Well, if 70% of our country is tuning into this and they're taking that as gospel, how do you think they're going to feel? And then if the conservatives are only watching it on Rumble and True Social, well, that's a problem because they'll never win because it's not where the people are.
The people, like purple is the battleground. Purple, as we classify the color in the voting county and demographic, purple is the blend between red and blue. Purple is the battleground. And where there has to be this big tent where people are saying, hey, we no longer want the bureaucrats to be in control of our life. Because really when we like pull it all down to like the nuts and bolts, what I think, what politics specifically for me, is when we outsource our liberty and then empower bureaucrats to run our lives. That's the true danger of this, because I mean the legislative arm of our government needs to be focused on legislation, and I think there's a lot of different political nuance in the way that we're actually executing against these things. But when we're actually just continuing to put more and more and more authority and accountability on our government, and this is what politicians will do. So like follow with me on this, which is when there's a border problem, the legislative arm of our government doesn't take accountability. They say, okay, who's the head of the Border Patrol? See how that works? Mm-hmm. They don't say, we have to fix this because this is directly our fault. And the legislative arm is here to enact policies that will fix something. Or criminal behavior, white collar crime, or name the activity. It's always the head bureaucrat. That's who's accountable, right? So you've essentially been able to outsource accountability as a politician to the head bureaucrat. Mm-hmm. And now you never have to take responsibility because then it's always about your second term. I'm going to hold them accountable. When in all reality, they're the ones that are accountable. Like, they won't ever accept accountability. They can outsource accountability to a bureaucrat. And then when you do that, though, you've also outsourced control. And when I think that's an extreme conflict with liberty, because if you have a self-licking ice cream cone, which is the largest employer in the world, which is the federal government. It has no carrot to try to downsize itself. It has every carrot to increase the size, increase the scope, increase. Because grow, and then when the legislative arm, and we'll call it the legislative arm of our government with the executive, and between those two things, as we start to look at how we're balancing the power and then outsourcing the accountability to bureaucrats and then increasing the amount that we have to pay for this. Well, all that is this is a shift in accountability between the people that we elect and then the people that directly benefit from having more funding. For me, I'm like, this is fairly easy. We have to at least course correct because there's this huge national deficit. There's this encroachment on individual liberties, which I truly believe. I think most of, I mean, one, I think we pay too much in our taxes to get what I don't think is directly representative to what the people want. Well, by the way, if bureaucrats are in power, what are they going to do? They're going to spend more of your money because it's not their money. They don't give a shit about it.
They don't care.
It's like a Silicon Valley startup with a spigot of funding.
Yeah.
They don't care and they don't really give a shit because there's never going to be an accountability mechanism. Like nobody's going to come actually ask for the fucking rent to come due because nobody ever gets fired. When you never get fired from the government. You can't get fired from the government.
You just resign.
You resign, and then you're gonna
get a retirement.
Then you're gonna get a retirement, or you're gonna go to work for one of 1,000 different consulting firms that are gonna hire you because you've been in a position of authority. You can't get like that's the craziest thing in the world is like. I mean, I have like all kinds of different auditors and all kinds of different people that are looking over my shoulder all the fucking time. It's like, but who's supposed to be auditing them? Oh, that's our elected officials.
Yeah, no consequence.
No. And when they do fuck up, when people die, or billions of dollars in equipment is left behind in Afghanistan, heads should roll.
Not one did.
Not one did.
They got promoted.
Yeah, they got promoted. You get a better job. Like it's the whole adage of like fuck up, move up, right? And I think that's one of the problems that people people really have a hard time with is because they're so burnt out with the same thing over and over. If you elect me, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to fix it this time. No, baby, really this time, I'm not going to hit you again, I promise you. And that's the way I think the voting public feels. It's like they feel like they've been in an abusive relationship where they're just getting the shit tuned out of them all the time. They're like, but this time it's going to be different.
Yeah.
This time it's going to be different. Like, and that's the way politicians treat voters. I truly believe it.
Well, the whole no consequence thing is perplexing because we just saw it on a grand stage with the Secret Service, where the director of the Secret Service in a near catastrophic, I mean, it was definitely a disaster, but a near catastrophic circumstance where a former president and a candidate for president was almost assassinated, where somebody was actually killed, 2 people severely injured, multiple failures, likely based on all the information I have, which is even insider information, the Secret Service failed. The actual local law enforcement that are inadvertently and really discreetly the Secret Service passing the buck off on them, they did the right thing. There's a lot of evidence that they did the right thing. And we're trying to relay the information, but because of the way that the SOPs are on the ground, the Secret Service failed. Was it an operational failure? Was it a leadership failure? I don't know. It was a failure. I'm not tuned in. I watched the congressional hearings, and what disgusted me is the lack of accountability. I mean, the director deferred to the FBI while she was being briefed by the Senate. And I'm like, the point of this hearing is for accountability, not for you to defer. Yeah. The law of the land is the Senate and the sitting Congress who are representing the people of this country, and you're not answering anything, but because you're like, there's an ongoing investigation. This is the investigation, and you're deferring to the FBI. So what happens? She resigns. She gets her paycheck. She gets her pension, and she sails away. The acting director gets into position, and he's like, I'm going to fix some things, and he didn't fix anything. Like, he's going in that position. The fix is people want accountability. What does that mean? They want people fired, convicted, and held responsible for what happened. We're in the week of the anniversary, which is August 30th was the official pullout. We're in the week of the anniversary of the biggest failure likely in the U.S. military and the U.S. government in recent history, besides Vietnam as a whole. Mm-hmm. And we're supposed to trust a government that likely killed its own president, had a LSD program called MK Ultra that was doping and drugging its own citizens, and all of the things subsequently since the 60s and 70s. We're supposed to forget about that. I'm very concerned about the health of our country because, like you said in the beginning of this podcast, it's like if you take an individual, they're obese and they're being brainwashed by their phone, that is in a nutshell what the government is. It's representative of that broken individual that's now making up the institutions that continues to get morbidly obese. And that sucks because where is the check and balance? Trump is likely the most, he is the fat pill, right, for this country. He is the pill that you're going to take, and he could shrink it for a period of time. You know, Ronald Reagan, I think, was the last president to talk about this openly, about the reduction of the government and getting the hell out of the way. But the closest we'll get to that is to getting away from that for likely a temporary period of time is that morbidly obese pill that's Trump that will fix it for just a couple years before it gets fat and bloated again. But if you don't stop it, who knows where we'll be in a couple years, man.
Well, I mean, it's trillions of dollars in debt.
What is it, 30-something trillion dollars?
35
right
trillion is what the last count, and it just continues to climb. There's no way economically, you can't even you can't crunch the numbers. Trillion, yeah. You can't crunch the numbers out of this. Like you can't build a model that says we will be able to eventually work our way out of debt as a nation without a supernova type economic event where, to me, that just seems like a fairly obvious one that we should all be concerned with as a nation, because this debt is at this point a national security issue. And if we're not recognizing the fact that the federal government has just continued to increase spending, and by the way, not only waste blood and treasure of the American taxpayer, like our lives, the lives of our peers, billions, trillions of dollars in these wars. Like trillions of dollars in these wars in the last 20 years.
Crazy.
And I get it. Like I participated in them, like under what I feel is like the correct information that I had at the time. However, when you think about it, we left billions of taxpayer dollars of equipment in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Billions.
Built
billions
their
of
army
dollars
from scratch.
And who got fired for that?
Nobody.
Like, there's this lack of accountability across the board, and I don't know how we actually get to the point where we say, one, we have to hold people accountable. The people we actually have to hold accountable. It's the same thing that was happening with defund the police. It's like, it's not defund the police. The police go out and typically, I would say the majority of the time, they go out and enforce the laws that are written by your political representation. So you have to elect better representation. Like it's like defund the police. No, it's defund politicians. I think Dan Holloway actually has that T-shirt, which I dearly love. But it's like, no, you have to at least take accountability and then elect people for the right reasons.
Let me show you before we close out, I want to share these numbers with you, because this is an interesting statistic. Baker shared this with me, and hunters and gun owners not registered to vote by state. Arizona, 133,000. Georgia, 350,000. North Carolina, 370,000. Pennsylvania, 515,000 hunters and gun owners not registered to vote. Total number of veterans living in swing states. You got a swing state like Virginia, 707,000 veterans live in Virginia, and 277,000 not registered to vote, which I would likely venture to say is a large population.
And they have to.
Yeah.
Like, I out of all the things that we've done in our lives, like from like taking accountability, duty, service, like guys have to get out and they have to vote because they have to persuade other veterans to have a voice in our government. They have to because
Joe Kent, you had Joe Kent.
Fucking love Joe.
Joe Kent, his vote last cycle 2 years ago for Congress was a few thousand votes, right? That few thousand votes compared to the registered Republicans in his district, hundreds of thousands that were unregistered to vote, that never vote. So it's like they just could have came out and just did it, but the
10%.
Maybe it's the conservative ideology where it's like, well, my vote won't matter. Your vote does matter. And if you don't want it to matter, then don't vote and be prepared. But get out there and at least give the people who are stepping up to the plate the opportunity to serve in that place and change things, at least locally in your district, every couple of years and every 6 years in the Senate. It's like you only get a shot at this every couple of years.
Every couple of years, man.
Just get off your butt and vote November 5th.
November 5th.
I got to pee.
Mike Glover, thank you, buddy.
I drank
Look forward
all of
to
this.
it. I know you did. Let's do this.
Thanks.
Thanks, man.
Yep.